Hello, Andy here. Just going to give a quick video this afternoon on the motor mounts for the DJI Phantom to allow you to install bigger uprated motors and larger props. So I hope you find the video of interest. Thanks very much. Cheers for now. Okay, so here we are. We're looking at the motor mount extenders for the DJI Phantom. So basically what we're going to cover is there's three parts to the extender bracket. Part 1, part 2, which is a strengthening plate, and part 3, which is the strengthening plate at the bottom. We're also going to cover the hardware you're going to get with the kit, so you get everything that you need. One crucial thing that you mustn't do is the bolts you remove from the existing motor mounts in the Phantom are 8mm. Do not use them with these brackets. In the kit you'll get some 6mm bolts to secure the motor onto the mounts, which must be used. If you do use the longer ones, you will damage your motors because the threads can inside the motor damage the 3 cables that go into the motor and connect to the windings. The existing DJI ones are too long, so you must use the 6mm ones given in the kit. I'm just going to quickly show you what it looks mounted, or what part of it looks mounted. So here's one, and this is a kit without the strengthening plate on. So you can see that you get 4 long bolts to connect the mount onto the Phantom. Space here so you can orientate your motor, because there is no standard how the motor wires come out from the motor. So what I'm meaning is, when you look at the bottom motor, you obviously get the 16 and 19mm spacings, but where the leads come out, excuse me. Incoming call from Let's turn that off. There's no standard where these motor leads come out, so it may come in between that space or that space, and then it will kick your motor around. So the idea of having additional holes in the motor mount is to allow you to rotate the motor, so hopefully you'll get the wires coming out this way and not that way. It all depends on the motors you're using when you're upgrading from the standard motors, although obviously you can still use the standard motors on these mounts. So I'm going to show you how to install them now. Okay, so here we are. We're going to assemble the mount onto the frame. So what you want to do, you want to get the base plate, and you want to get the strengthening plate, and you want to look at the cutout in the middle. And what you want is it sloping left to right, so you can see here that it's sloping in that direction. So you're going to overlay the two like so, and what that will make sure is, first of all, that the 4 holes we're going to drop the bolts through line up, and then obviously it helps you align the motor. So I've got my simulated motor mount extender here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop 1 bolt through, well, I'm going to drop 2 bolts through. 2 bolts through, and these are 2.5mm, and then I'm going to drop it through the holes of the Phantom, and then just nip up by hand the nylon nut. So underneath we need to put on the strengthening plate. So again, line it up at the bottom so all the holes line up, and just twist on the nuts by hand. So that's those 2 done. I'm going to drop the other 2 bolts through. 1, 2. Flip it over again. Just do up the nuts. They're just spun on at the moment. Oh, sorry. They're just spinning on the nuts. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get a 3mm bolt and I'm going to push it through one of the holes. Actually, here's one on the floor. Okay, so you got the motor mount on loose, and it is obviously very loose. So what we're going to do now is just going to start nipping up the nuts to get some tension on them. So just going to put this on my lap, and then with a spanner just going to use finger pressure. Try and get it in shot better for you guys. There we go. Just going to start doing this up just to stop the mount from wobbling around, really. So just using finger pressure. As soon as you feel it tighten up, move on to the next one. So we're just going to get some form of even tautness over all 4 bolts. Okay, so now to help us just torque it up, we're going to get a 3mm bolt and drop it through any one of the motor mount bolts, and that's going to help us when we're torquing up the bolts that the actual 2 plates are aligned correctly with one another. So now what I'm going to do is apply a little bit more pressure onto all of them, and I always do them in a diagonal fashion. Okay, again just nipping it. I'm just gripping the screwdriver with my fingers, so you know you don't need to apply a lot of pressure on these nuts at all, otherwise you're going to end up breaking your Phantom. Okay, so there we have that. So before we go much further now, I'm going to position the motor onto the mount. So making sure your cables are fed through nicely, and one of mine is crossed over. Okay, get the 6mm nuts which come in the kit. Sorry, 6mm bolts. These are actually hex head, but you may get Phillips in the kit. So now turn the mount over and align up the motor with one of the holes, and I would just put bolts in loosely at the moment to get the motor aligned. So just wind it in a few threads and look for the next hole, which is there. There, and again just using finger pressure on this hex driver, and there. Okay, so you can see now that the motor is assembled. Let me get rid of this for you, it's doing some testing. So there we have it. So now you can, or I can, nip up the nuts. Now we've got the mount securely, the motor securely fixed on the motor. Just need to nip these up very, very slightly. Just a quarter of a turn. Okay, and then give the mount a wobble, and that's fine. So now you would take out the motor screws one by one, put a little bit of thread lock on them, then screw them back in and do them up with finger pressure. So thread lock will not harm FR4, but obviously don't use thread lock on your Phantom, otherwise you'll be dissolving the body. So there we have it. So that is the motor mount assembled, and I'm just going to show you the distance between the motor mounts now. On the existing model, the distance is 250, and on this one we've gone up to 293, so 293 millimeters, or that is about 11.5 inches between the center of the motors. So that is the kit. Well, I did fail to mention one thing, which probably will be in the attached PDF, that before you put the motor mount on, you just want to get a round file and just run a round file around the edges where the cable is going to pass. So obviously when the FR4 is cut, it's quite well, it is a very square corner, so you just want to run a little bit of wet and dry or a fine needle file around any edges that the cable is going to pass, and that'll just make sure your cables don't get chaffed with any vibration. So that just about does it. I will probably do some still photographs and blend them into the video for you. Now we're going to talk about some weights and why you can't use the standard motor mount, sorry, the motor bolts that you've extracted from the Phantom. You mustn't use these on the mount, and I'm just going to explain why, because I know that's going to come up in a question. So basically, the existing bolt that we've extracted from the Phantom is an 8mm bolt. I've actually measured it 7.75, but 8mm is near enough, and they're just these standard bolts that have come out of it, so you know, like so. So measuring the thickness of from there to there, the thickness the bolt is passing through on the existing motor mount, depth from underside here to top side, I've got 7.23. When you do your maths and you find out how deep the recess is where the screw head dips in, you can find out that distance. So that's the distance where the thread actually starts and bolts. It's 5.05. So when you're doing the maths, what it means is that the existing screw is 7.75, and it's going through the plastic body of the Phantom at 5.05. So it means the threads are protruding by 2.75mm into the bottom of the motor, which is fine, no problem at all. Now what you mustn't do is use the DJI bolts with the motors on my mounts, because you will damage your motors, and that's because we know that the bolt is 8mm, actually measured 7.75mm. We're going through two sheets of material, which is 1.6, which leaves 4.55. We know that the existing bolts went into the bottom motors by 2.7, so if you use the existing bolts in my mounts, you get an extra 1.85mm. Now that's not a lot, but it's a tremendous amount when you don't need it. So you must use the 6mm bolts, because as it shows you here, 6mm going through 1.6 and 1.6, which is the two sheets of FR4 on the mount and the strengthening plate. It leaves you 2.8mm, which is pretty close to what the existing one was, of 2.7. So make sure that you use the bolts applied. The weight of the kit, so that's the 3 plates, which is the mounting plate, the strengthening plate, the back plate, and the hardware, come out per motor at 13.7 grams. Now you can If you've got a Dremel, you could Dremel these off, and I'm going to do that in a minute and put in the description the weight of the savings. So there's, I think I measured it at 3 millimeters. Let me just see. Well, 2.07 millimeters of thread you don't actually need. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to Dremel those off, and obviously we're going to lose a little bit when we Dremel through them. Then I'm going to weigh them and just see what you could save. Now if you do obviously Dremel, what you want to do is obviously make sure that the sparks and any metal filings doesn't enter the vent grill. So you need to cover up your Phantom totally. You need to cover up your motors, because obviously the motor's got magnets in, and if you're using a Dremel, obviously it's stainless steel, and you don't want any metal filings getting into any of your electronics or motors. So the choice is yours. I'm going to do it and just tell you how much weight you're going to save. I don't think it's going to be a lot, but we would have 16 of them to do. And what I can do, I can take out the bolts once I Dremeled them, so you could Dremel them before you put them in, because I will give you the exact length the bolts need to be. These are 25mm. 20mm ones are too short, so I'm caught in the middle. But I will Dremel them off, show you the weight saving, and tell you how long the actual bolts need to be. So you could cut them down to length before you put it on the model. Then that would save any dust, metal dust getting inside your model. So I hope you found that interesting. That's it for me. I've got some exciting products coming up regarding my 450 build. Shall I show you or not? It's to do with RF from a GoPro, which we've been experiencing. So I'm going to give you a little preview of what I'm working on. Is been making a pure copper RF shield to wrap around the GoPro. Now I can't show you it wrapping around the GoPro because I'm using the GoPro to film at the moment, but this is 0.1mm thick pure copper. It's been CNC machined to encompass the GoPro, and from my testing it does reduce the RF from it. That's going to be covered in a whole new another video. I've got a handheld spectrum analyzer that I'm using. I want to do some more testing on this product before I do the video in detail, and give you guys the full technical spec of how it's going to help with stopping RF interference leaving the GoPro and affecting GPS lock on your models.